I hate it. She smiled wickedly and squeezed my thigh. One of these days, we're gonna get caught, I pleaded uselessly. Exactly. She clambered up the chain-link fence, leaving a muddy footprint on the no trespassing sign. She dropped lightly onto the ground on the other side and assumed a ta-da pose. Her curly black hair was dampening under a light rain. A fog crept in around us. If I got pinched with the trespassing, they'd violate my probation. Do not pass go. Straight to jail. My heart raced. God damn it, I muttered, as I clumsily hoisted myself over the fence after her. I met her at about 2 weeks ago at St. Paul's at an AA meeting, styrofoam cup in one hand, cigarette in the other. Haunting dark eyes that have seen too much. I don't buy love at first sight. But it was something like that. The sort of love that a junkie has for that new fix. I slipped on the other side of the fence, nearly falling into the mud. Suzy's laughter tittered in the darkness. Mischievous eyes glowed against her cigarette. Careful. Soft puffs of smoke enunciated the syllables. We crept towards the massive and abandoned complex of what used to be the state hospital. If this place was still operational, we'd both be right at home. Waist-high weeds soaked my jeans as we pressed quietly forward. Hundreds of dark windows watched our approach silently. I had an uneasy feeling that we were being watched. You feel that? It's like somebody's watching us. My laugh was forced. Here? She raised an eyebrow and blew a cloud of smoke into my face. You'd better give him a show then. Addicts never really cured. We just swapped vices. Pills for weed, dope for booze, nicotine for sex. We can't cope with the normalcy of sobriety, the boredom and pointlessness of life. Suzy's kink was risk. Risk of being caught mid-fuck. I guess it's mine too, although I didn't know until she introduced me to it. The thrill of being caught in a place I wasn't supposed to be, that was a rush that I never got from drugs. We fucked in bathrooms, libraries, museums, movie theaters. We broke into her estranged uncle's house, fucked in his kitchen. The night I met her, St. Paul's, in a confession booth, under the angry glare of Jesus on the cross. I never said I was proud of it. This is fucked up, I said, as we walked through the massive front door and into a semi-demolished lobby. I could hear a soft drip, drip, drip. The squeal of a rat. I had serious doubts that I'd be able to get it up. Last week's sex in the temporary abandoned hallway of the hospice ward was challenging enough, but this... Yes, she breathed against my neck. It sure is. She stuffed her hand down the front of my pants and gave me a playful squeeze, then danced down the graffiti-ridden corridor, skipping over a dirty puddle. Suzy, I hissed, into the blackness. Oh, look, she moaned. I followed her voice and found her lying in what looked like a hospital bed. She was twirling a pair of panties around one finger. No way, I said. Way, she said, beckoning me with a finger. Suzy, this is sick. I tried to ignore the smell of rat shit and the mold. I know, she purred. It's perfect. What's wrong with you? Oh, where to begin, she said. I shouldn't have been so surprised when the handcuffs clicked around my wrist. The other cuff affixed to the metal arm of the gurney. Handcuffs? Really? I didn't think you could be so... conventional, Suzy. I then noticed something. Someone. Barely perceptible in the inky blackness. A shift in the darkness. Subtle, but there. It was just outside of my vision, lurking. I could feel it watching. Suzy. She stared at me silently, no longer smiling. Suzy! More urgently this time, I stood up and I cursed as the metal on metal clanked, straining my wrist against the still-locked handcuff. Something's out there! Get that fucking thing off me! What the... It was all I could manage before I felt the hypodermic needle pierce my skin. Sorry, baby, she whispered into my ear. I felt a terrible warmth enter my bloodstream. The man that stepped out of the gloom wore a white lab coat like a doctor. thick-framed glasses set atop a bulbous nose, and he was beginning to show signs of balding. He was difficult to describe because he looked so ordinary. The sort of man that's completely invisible in a crowd. I was vaguely aware that I was screaming as I fell off the bed, my handcuffed wrist bending in a way it shouldn't. The pain was dull, and I was becoming very, very tired. Suzy! I twisted my neck to see, fighting back the overwhelming tiredness. Things were happening too fast. I couldn't make sense of it. My brain was sluggish, muddy. I couldn't keep up. I was peering through murky water. Suzy, I said dumbly. Well done, Susan, he whispered. His voice was like grinding broken glass under a boot. A droplet of saliva rolled down one worm-like lip. Much better than the last. This one has stamina. He'll last much longer. And then everything went dark. It was a familiar scene. I squinted against blinding light, fighting back a headache that threatened to launch me into orbit. What the fuck? That was all I could manage to get out. My throat was dry and hoarse. I opened an eyelid and took stock of my surroundings. I was in bed, in my apartment. Horribly bright sunlight poured through the gap between dirty curtains. What? I asked my empty apartment for a second time. It didn't answer. It couldn't have been a dream. It was so real. Too substantial. I took note of the empty wax baggies on my nightstand. Did I get high last night? What did Dante sell me? My stomach roiled, bubbled, and lurched. I dry heaved as I staggered to the bathroom, feeling the all-too-familiar self-hatred following a relapse. Not again, I thought, as I white-knuckled the porcelain lips of the toilet. I dry heaved again and cradled my belly through my hands. That's when I felt the skin of my stomach press into my palm. My first thought, oddly enough, was an innocuous, weird. But then I felt it again. Bump. Kick. Press. I scrambled backwards, slipping on the wet tiles. My back crashed against the wall hard. I let out a squeak. The headache went into overdrive. I pressed my hands onto my abdomen. Kick. Bump. What the fuck? I screamed. I pulled up my damp t-shirt and I could see a very small, maybe an inch or two incision. It was just beneath my belly button. It had been expertly stitched. Just beneath the stitches, amidst a few black, coiled hairs, barely perceptible, I could see it. My skin moved. A soft press outward. What? What the fuck? I screamed, with a primitive desperation and fear I never knew existed. I dropped my phone twice before I managed to access the contacts. I scrolled to the S's. Suzy was gone. I checked my texts. Deleted. Facebook. Poof. Call history. You get the idea. It was gone. What? I still wasn't getting an answer from the empty room. I pressed gingerly below my belly button, and it pressed back. That's when it dove downward, scrambling through my guts. I felt a twist with a sharp pain in my testicles. A memory flashed. The man in the lab coat, scalpel raised, thin trail of saliva working its way down his lips. His plain face had already faded from memory. No! I dropped to my knees in agony, cradling my balls, and I ripped off my soiled underwear and examined myself in panic. I could see something. I could see something moving, slowly pulsating just beneath the skin. I touched it softly with a shaking finger, and it whipped back upward. The pain was indescribable. I felt it worm its way through my testicles, my intestines, and nearly into my chest. My racing heart felt asynchronous as the thing pulsed into a different rhythm. No, 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 I wailed. In a blind fit of panic, I pulled off a dirty sock off my foot and stuffed it into my mouth. I bit down as hard as I could and plunged a finger into the incision, popping a stitch. I made it to the first knuckle, screams muffled. I'm pretty sure I felt my intestines. I felt warm blood running down my stomach as I wiggled my fingers around, trying to find whatever it is that was inside me. And between sobs, I heard banging at the door. I whimpered miserably, hugging myself and pleading to whatever God would listen. The relationship between desperation and piousness truly is remarkable. Thud, thud, thud. Police department, open up. Fuck, I told the wet floor as I spat the sock out of my mouth. I gave the empty baggies a wary glance. Open the door or I'm kicking it in, he shouted. I don't want to break your door. Just open up. I'm coming, I croaked. I stumbled at the door, knocking a lamp over in the process. Thud, thud. His baton was poised to strike the door a third time when I opened it. Hi. I was barely able to choke the word out. He slipped his baton back into his belt. What's going on here? What do you mean? I could see my reflection in his sunglasses. I look worse than I thought. Stop it, he said, bushy mustache quivering in annoyance. I heard you screaming when I came up the stairs. Half the tenants in this building called 911. He peered over my shoulder, making me actually aware of the drug paraphernalia on my bedside table. You fighting with somebody? No. He gestured at my bleeding gut. How'd that happen? I briefly considered telling him the truth. The truth. You wanna know the truth? I briefly considered telling him the truth. Briefly. I went to the old state hospital with a girl I met a few weeks ago, to fuck her, obviously. Well, officer, funny thing is, instead of fucking me, she tricked me. She handcuffed me to a bed and drugged me so that a mad scientist can implant a creature inside me. You ever see Alien? Yeah, well, it's like that, but much worse, because it can get into your balls. And if I can chase it back down there, you'll be able to see it breathing against my nutskin. Nothing. I popped a stitch. I had surgery the other day. Ouch. Need an ambulance? He glanced at his wristwatch. You look like you need an ambulance. He cocked his head to his lapel mic. County, this is 107. Send EMS to my location. Adult male, stomach laceration. No! I insisted. I'm fine. I needed some time to figure this out. Anything in the apartment I need to know about? The last time a cop asked me that question, I wound up in jail. No, definitely not. I'm fine, really. Okay, then. He was hesitant, still trying to peer over my shoulder into the apartment. If you need us, you know who to call. Thanks, I choked, shutting the door and leaning heavily against it. Every person has what we call a mental breaking point. It's a ledge where you can look down into madness. If you've been there, you know. I was there. Teetering. The thing slowly quested its way back downward, creeping around the side of my guts, probing my insides. And I plummeted from that edge. With the frenzied panic of a cornered animal, I half crawled, half scrambled on all fours back into the bathroom. I tore the remaining stitches with my fingertips, stopping only to vomit. My breathing was labored. Small bits of phlegm, spit, and puke spattered the floor and walls. I plunged 2 fingers into the bleeding hole with a desperation I didn't know existed. I felt it. I poked that thing. My voice cracked as I tried to pinch the creature between my thumb and forefinger. It was hard, not unlike the exoskeleton of an oversized millipede, but also serpentine, like an eel. It flinched from my fingers and tried to worm its way back down toward my balls, but I had it. Barely. I felt a warmth underneath me as I pissed myself, and the creature started to slip from my blood-soaked fingers. With a scream, I plunged my entire hand into the open wound, skin ripping and tearing. I watched with a detached and perverse amusement as I buried my entire hand into my stomach up to the wrist. Whoa, I thought. I'm in deep. I grabbed it in a death grip and pulled. It felt like I was trying to turn myself inside out. I pulled and tore as hard as I could. I still don't know how I managed to stay conscious. My vocal cords strained to scream, but there was no air left in my lungs. It was closer to a wet gurgle, and this grisly tug-of-war match went on for what felt like hours, although in reality it probably was just a few seconds. I was sobbing and laughing maniacally as I yanked and tugged. I felt a final pop inside me, and it broke loose. It coiled around my finger and wrist, briefly reminding me of Suzy's handcuffs, and I started laughing again as it hissed at me, bearing tiny little teeth. Its countless little green eyes were pure to hatred and aggression, and I looked curiously at the alien creature that was wrapped under white knuckles. I was aware that it was biting and chewing on my hand with a savage ferocity, but I didn't care. With my last bit of strength, I threw that horrible creature into the toilet. It splashed around and hissed, baring its teeth, and I flushed. As I lay in a pool of my blood, feeling increasingly lightheaded and weak, I wondered Offhandedly, if my guts were hanging out. They probably were. I didn't have the strength to look. My bathroom looked like a murder scene. Jesus goddamn Christ. A familiar voice amidst familiar radio chatter. Get an ambulance to my location immediately. Traumatic injury, major bleeding, adult male. I felt pressure on my stomach. A pair of gloved hands were stuffing gauze into me. I take a guy's word one goddamn time. This is what I get. Jesus. Goddamn Christ. His mustache quivered as he pulled more gauze from his little med kit and kept packing it into the gaping hole in my guts. What the fuck, man? I faded in and out. More radio chatter and more footsteps. A couple of paramedics surrounded me. Jesus, one of them said. I gestured sluggishly towards the toilet with a bloody hand. I flushed. What's that, son? The officer's eyes were sympathetic, and he leaned in closer. It down the toilet. I let my hand drop back down to my sides, smearing more blood on my jeans. I heard Velcro ripping, and I felt pressure around my wrists and ankles. I could hear bits and pieces of the conversation. It's just talking to him. Seemed fine. Self-inflicted. Suicidal. Wheels creaked, and I was moving, bouncing down my apartment hallway in a hurry. I woke up to the soothing chirps and beeps of medical hospital equipment. The room was dark. My mind was slow, confused. Did I overdose again? Nostalgia isn't the right word. It did come to mind. I curved my neck downward. Neat stitchwork sealed my pallid skin. Heels clicked off linoleum, getting louder. Nurse! My throat was dry and hoarse. Click, click, click. Nurse! A silhouette appeared at my doorway, silently considering me. Nurse, I need... What did I need? The police? A doctor? How does one explain that a mad scientist put an alien inside your belly? I watched a nurse pass by behind the silhouette outside the door. Good evening, doctor, she said, curtly as she passed. Good evening, Silhouette replied softly. His voice was strangely familiar, in an unpleasant way, like grinding broken glass under a boot. My mind reeled. I pulled uselessly against the 4-point restraint I was trapped in. No, I whispered, terror seizing me. Get away from me! He took another step forward and pushed a pair of thick-framed glasses back atop his bulbous nose. What did you do to me? What did you do? What did you put inside me? My vocal cords tightened, and I felt like they were going to split. More footsteps. Ketamine, a woman's voice purred. He'll be napping soon. Poor man. What drives a person to do this? She gave the needle a little flick with her fingers before she slid it into my skin. Warmth spread through my body. Deja vu isn't the right word, but it comes to mind. No, please. I struggled against the sedatives coursing through my veins. The beeps and chirps, soothing moments ago, now created a horrific ambience. The nurse left the room, and I was alone with the doctor, who stood over me, tracing an icy finger up and down my stitching. She was pregnant, you know. Whew. My mind was foggy again. She was ready to lay her eggs. Her little babies. I remember trying to scream, but the sedatives took control as I opened my mouth, and blackness took me. I woke up on the 3rd floor. The psych ward. Sort of place where you hear door locks snap when you get too close. Something to do with plastic bracelets that you can't cut off. You see cops coming with empty holsters, hauling off some lunatic that punched a nurse. The residents shamble around like zombies, medicated into an obedient stupor. I've been up here for a while now. Not everyone here is crazy, but most of us are. My roommate Walter, he let me borrow his cell phone that somehow smuggled in. He also showed me the little scar in his belly. You could probably guess his story. We joked about the phone. It's freedom at first glance until you thought about it. Who would we call? The cops? My sponsor? Suzy? So instead I ended up on this internet forum where strangers believe the unbelievable. People who will listen to my story. I wanted to get it off my chest. Because I'm not sure how much time I have left. I don't know if the bubbling in my guts is from this morning's oatmeal. Or, well, Walter gets it. Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and I just wanted to tell you thank you so much for watching tonight's video. Or listening to tonight's podcast on the podcast, if you're listening to that there at Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or wherever you could happen to listen to podcasts. I wanted to remind you guys also that my wife sells loose leaf tea at etsy.com/shop/ivorymonocle-tea. She has different teas, including Creepypasta teas, and you can get a Mr. Creepypasta tea. If you ask for a dabbing sticker, she also has those. And of course, I wanted to give a big thank you to everyone who checks out patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta and supports the show, keeps the light on, gives me treats for my now 2 cats, both Hylas and Hercules. Both of them are a handful. And especially a big thank you to Saha, Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Mazikeen, Ken Lando Higuchi, Chompski, Nico kaeo, Tristain Pelton, Stephen VanHuss, Chance Burnett, Diana Kraus, G. Weevil 3, TheRedOakShieldVirus, Hades' Nephew, Carter Barenfanger, Dr. Strawberry, Jordan Wayne Deckard, Bradney Leipe, The Government Monitoring System, Ann Charron, rumblefox, AcidSystem, Mike Bullock, Rafael Rodriguez, Dan Sweet, Mad Marstomp, Prozac and Pancake Appreciation Society, Sean Mills, Brian Arce, Cryptic Nightmares, Shadow Morningstar, Somber Puppet, Brianna Wright, Someone You Love, Said the King 56, Bad Honey, S-Man, Kiri the Sloth, Patrick Schoolmeister, Thomas Burgett, Barbara Maceo, Bobby Carmen, Liam Newman, The Homeless Bird 93, Sky Harbor, Caleb Dougal, Last Blade Song, Eliminator 86, The Ginger Bros, Aaron Stormcrow, and Corey X Kenshin. A big thank you to all of you guys and everybody down there in the description. I really can't thank you guys enough for supporting the show. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And everybody who listens. Sweet dreams.